afternoon, everyone. This is a meeting of the City Council Transportation Committee. Today is Monday, April 10th. Looks like it may just be me for the time being. So we're going to, well, in the interest of going ahead and disposing of this item, we'll go to item 3 on the agenda. New application for a CNPC for Dennis Luxury Transportation LLC. Detective Pitts, can you introduce this item?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, we have a new application for executive sedan service, Dennis Luxury Transportation LLC. Mr. Chairman, this applicant has met the necessary requirements.
Okay, and they're looking for two CNPCs, right?
Yes, sir, two CPNC's permits.
All right, and they have met all of the requirements, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Alan Dennis here. Mr. Dennis, here's your opportunity to have 30 seconds of fame in front of the prestigious City Council Transportation Committee. There's probably all of, 2 people, including one of them being my wife, that are watching the live stream. So tell us about your business.
So my business is basically, I wanted to do something very premium for the city. I want to provide something that was legendary, that customers will remember you by, right? After COVID, I think a lot of people wanted to travel with their families exclusively, and not so much on certain vans, on shuttles. So the service that I'm going to offer is going to be definitely something luxury to the city, providing water and snacks, something that they can't get from your rideshare.
Excellent. So the actual business is located in Calera, but you'll be operating in the city of Birmingham?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. So I'll recommend this item to the full council for the agenda, and that will likely appear on our council agenda not tomorrow, but maybe perhaps the following week or the week after. And ultimately, it's up to the council to decide, but it'll move forward with my recommendation. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next up, we have an amendment to a cost-sharing agreement with the city of Mountain Brook relative to sidewalk improvements on Haygood Street. And Colin?
Good afternoon. My name is Colin Alexander. I serve as Senior Planner for the Birmingham Department of Transportation. What's before you is an amendment to a previous cost-sharing agreement that we executed with the City of Mountain Brook for a federal project to build sidewalks along Haygood Street in both Mountain Brook and City of Birmingham right-of-way. As the project was going along, we asked that an additional section be added to that project that was entirely within the City of Birmingham city limits. So that was added to the project, and we agreed that we would pay the cost of the match on that grant project. So that upped the cost by about $10,000. So all we need to do is execute that cost-sharing agreement. The work is done. We're just working it through the process to get the agreement executed.
Okay. If I recall correctly, has a significant portion of this work already been completed?
It's completed.
Okay. All right, so yeah. This was an excellent deal for the city of Birmingham, by the way. Most of the project was in the city of Mountain Brook. So they're getting them to pay for half of it. It was, well, most of the project, I said that wrong. Most of the project was in the city of Birmingham, but the city of Mountain Brook paid for half of it. So thank you to Mayor Welch and the Mountain Brook City Council for their assistance. So again, we don't have a quorum here for the committee meeting, so this item will move forward with my recommendation.
All right, thank you.
All right. Next up, we have Christina Argo from BDOT and Thomas Yulo from PEP to talk about parking systems and curbside management.
Presentation. Oh, I think that's the wrong
Yeah, this
slide
is
deck.
the wrong presentation.
Or printed copies.
Okay, I'll get started then. Good afternoon. My name is Thomas Yule. I serve as Senior Planner in the Department of Planning, Engineering, and Permits. I'm here today with my colleague in BDOT, Christina Argo, to talk about how we're starting to think more progressively and differently about both on and off-street parking and how we interact, require, and regulate it. So I'm going to let Christina Argo first talk about on-street parking, curbside management, and then I'll jump back in.
Thanks, Thomas. So I serve as the Strategic Projects and Innovation Division Manager for BDOT. So, we wanted to come before you guys today to kind of lay the groundwork for a lot of things, a lot of changes you'll be seeing rolling out over the next couple of years, and kind of take a step back and talk through the vision and why it's important of this work that we're beginning to start. So if we look at the first slide, that talks about our vision. The city adopted a comprehensive plan, how many years ago? 10 years ago, and it suggested that we implement a parking framework, and it's really going to help us move into the 21st century. So the first step in reaching this vision, it involves our vision related to parking policies, and that will enable us to reinforce transit and affordability for our residents, while also spurring economic opportunity. So this also goes hand in hand with workforce accessibility. So by increasing workforce accessibility with transit and affordable housing, we are going to be able to retain talent and continue to grow our economy here in the city. Concurrently, BDOT is also working with BPD to tackle operational aspects of the city's parking system. So we've got policy that we're working on, and then we've got operational things. If you go to the second slide here, when we're thinking about our parking system and the goals that we're trying to reach, we acknowledge that the system is very complex, and it's going to involve strategic actions over the next couple of years that will get us to having a functioning system that generates revenue, that allows for us to reinvest back into the neighborhood, and really make some key improvements into the built environment. So some of the long-term goals that we'll be able to tackle and address as a byproduct of us updating our ordinance and requirements, affordable housing. If you take out the cost to provide parking, suddenly there's a lot of projects that become a lot more affordable to develop. We have a goal of being a multimodal city. We want to continue to work with BPA to develop our existing public parking assets, and then also looking at improvements we can make to the built environment. So that's the parking system. So if we move to curbside management, that might be a term that's unfamiliar to a lot of folks. So I pulled a definition that really helps define what we're talking about. So curbside management seeks to inventory, optimize, allocate, and manage the curb space to maximize mobility, safety, and access for the wide variety of curb demands. So basically what we're talking about is, a good example of that is looking at 20th Street and all the action that happens down there, and it's deliveries and people running in to get their lunch, or people unloading, or people parking, and it's just how do we look at that strategically and allocate the curb in the best way possible to give everybody access. So in addition to that, if we adopt these policies, then it'll enable us to prioritize transit and bicycling infrastructure. We can look at other things like deliveries, passenger pickup and drop off, green stormwater infrastructure, and then also manage parking. So ultimately, it helps us prioritize multimodal transportation in the city. So, next slide, we look at, we're talking about our parking systems and the operational piece. So we are currently working on ordinance and policy changes related to our operations. And I just included, the 5 kind of first steps that we're delving in on. We're strengthening our management within BDOT and BPD and having, better coordination between the two teams. Expanding enforcement options for parking enforcement officers, enabling them to disable and tow cars. We've got to look at the back-end accountability for non-payment of parking tickets. And then expanded coverage area and hours within the city. So those are kind of some of the first few steps that we will be taking over the next few months. And I think you are up. That's still your... Or you want this?
Sure. Great. Yeah, so in addition to thinking about curbside management and on-street parking, we're also looking at off-street parking. That's largely regulated by our zoning ordinance. In our zoning ordinance, we require that developers build a certain number of parking spaces depending on what kind of building they're building and the size of that building generally. So right now, developers, if they want to deviate from that very specific number, they have to do some kind of bureaucratic hoops that it's not really a guarantee that they'll be able to even deviate. Some parts of downtown, like the area we're in now, has no parking requirement. That's kind of our central business district. And then right outside of that, there's a 50% reduction in our requirement. But outside of this kind of core downtown area, our entire city, there's some pretty hefty parking requirements, pretty hefty number of parking spaces required to be provided on site. There are some small discounts for being near a bus stop or having a bike rack installed on site. And we currently don't have any bicycle parking requirements either. There's no minimum number of bicycle parking spaces you have to provide at a new development. And we included this picture here. There's a picture of the Eastwood area. I just think it's kind of telling. Probably a good 2/3 of that is parking, and that's not necessarily because that's what the developer wanted. That's what the city required. And so I guess the question then becomes, is this okay and should we change it, or why should we change it? Well, there are a few reasons why it makes sense to take a look at these pretty hefty parking minimums. One, we have a $60 million bus rapid transit system running in Birmingham now, and having density and walkability around those transit stops is critical to supporting our BRT and to having good ridership. So when we require a lot of parking right in and around our bus stops for our BRT or any of our bus routes, it's not conducive to land use that supports public transit. In addition, as Christina mentioned, it's not conducive for affordable housing. If I'm a low to moderate income individual and I want to buy an affordable housing unit, right now I'm most likely buying that unit plus a parking space. So if the developer isn't required to provide a parking space, all of a sudden that unit can be up to sometimes 20% cheaper. Some studies have seen up to 20% reduction. That's maybe on the high end, but in addition, excessive parking requirements aren't great sustainability-wise. 99% of the parking spaces in Birmingham are impervious, meaning stormwater can't go through it, which means that stormwater goes somewhere else, including our roadways, our yards, and sometimes people's houses. So in addition, all that parking contributes to urban heat island effect, so it leads to neighborhoods that have more parking and less trees. instead of more trees and less parking, which can yield sometimes up to a 10% difference in ambient temperatures. So it makes our city hotter and more prone to stormwater impact. And, you know, we're constantly looking at what our peer cities are doing, and a lot of cities have started moving towards just an outright elimination of parking minimums, even in the southeast. Lexington, Kentucky, Raleigh, North Carolina, and Jackson, Tennessee have all eliminated parking minimums citywide. So if we go to our, if we go to 2 slides from now. Yeah, so on our next steps, we're going to be presenting some zoning text amendments related to our parking minimums next week at the Citizen Advisory Board to get their input and buy-in, and then we'll be going through our normal cadence of zoning text amendment change meetings, including Planning Commission. We plan to have a work session with them before presenting this at the Planning Commission. We plan to go to Planning and Zoning Committee. We plan to come back before this committee to present these text amendment changes, and ultimately City Council. And I think Christina has some next steps on some of the other stuff.
So yeah, also related to policy, we are we're looking at private parking lot regulations, which is part of this package, but it doesn't really move the needle when it comes to talking about our vision and our goals. But as soon as that wraps up, then we'll jump right back into looking at our parking enforcement operations and getting some key changes made in the ordinance, and we'll be back to you guys with those changes to review.
Okay. This is the subject that we all love to hate.
That's right, parking is a dirty word.
Yes. Okay, so excellent. Trying to think from the perspective of lay folks that may be listening, the sort of big picture issues is that I think it's safe to say that how we manage parking on the public side of things, which the city of Birmingham is only responsible for parking that's within the public right-of-way. So, i.e. on-street parking. And I know my experience in coming into the city council in 2017, it was a priority issue for Mayor Whitfin's administration to, explore how the system was functioning at the time. And what we found was that responsibility for on-street parking was spread out over, at a minimum, 3 or 4 different departments. And so there was coordination was difficult. Certain departments had responsibility for doing things like maintaining the meters, and other departments had responsibility for doing enforcement. And say the least, it was just sort of disjointed, and was, if I had to speculate, I would, and I have speculated that it was designed to fail. So there's been concerted effort since then to get it right, and that's really what this is all about. So there's, I still have people who come up and compliment me on the massive change that we made by allowing people to, do electronic payments for on-street parking. People really seem to appreciate that, but there's obviously a lot more that we can do in that regard. Just to improve the system, generally there's, a lot of areas where there are parking meters that need them for the purpose of creating turnover, because if you know, certain folks will park their vehicles on the street indefinitely. And the metered parking, the purpose of it is not to be a revenue generator for the city of Birmingham or any entity for that matter. The real purpose of it is to create turnover. And so if you have a storefront on a street that has on-street parking, it's in your interest for on-street parking to work correctly so that, parking spaces are available for your potential customers. There are plenty of areas that probably need meter parking that don't have them. Probably some areas that have metered parking that don't need them. So I think it's fair to say that what you guys are presenting is sort of a comprehensive analysis, even going to the level of looking at our private property parking requirements. One of the things that I think is an important aspect of looking at all of this is the enforcement piece. Because it's been my experience that folks will create parking wherever they think they can get away with it.
It's not just your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually, during the NCAA tournament, I think the BJCC and ALDOT went to extra lengths to discourage people from parking on the right-of-way underneath the Expressway 2059 interchange because during the Garth Brooks concert, we saw that folks just invented parking where none previously existed. So in any case, my point is that if allowed to, people will take liberties with public right-of-way, and so I think the enforcement component is really important in evaluating all of this. And I want to point out, something that we currently, the city of Birmingham does not do is we do not tow vehicles unless there is some threat to public safety. So a car parked in an alley that's potentially preventing an emergency vehicle from, going down the alley or a street or some other situation similar to that, or some sort of, criminal incident. But generally, we don't tow vehicles. And
Well, stay tuned on that topic.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm glad that we're looking at that because it's something, that unfortunately, because people take liberties wherever they're allowed, I think you have to address that situation. So,
all the policy and ordinance changes really cannot be effective unless we dig into the enforcement and the accountability piece. So we are looking at this as a complete system and looking at every single piece of that system so we can make sure going forward our parking system will function. So, and to your point about areas that are metered or not metered, if we think about how our downtown has changed in the last 10 years, even in the last couple years post-COVID, there are a lot of areas that, have different businesses and different needs. And so that is another thing that we'll be looking at is where do we need to add metered spots? Where do they not make sense anymore? So all of that will be accounted for as we dig into this process.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting, talking about the Eastwood area in particular. Back when the Walmart was built out there, Walmart's model for their conventional retail centers is to build for the highest maximum capacity that's based off of essentially 2 days a year. So, even looking at this aerial picture, you can see that maybe a third of the parking lot is occupied. And, that's notable because it is all impervious surface. And as we saw, I believe it was last summer, especially, heavy rainfall in Porto Madrid was about 6 feet underwater. Beyond that, all of that parking space is not generating jobs or income, for folks, not generating occupational tax and that's other considerations for looking at our parking minimum policy, letting the developer, private property owner, sort of decide what they need. One question that comes to mind is, what do you got with regard to that parking minimums? What are you guys thinking about? So that would really apply to like a new development. Somebody's building a new building. Yes, maybe. So let's say this is a commercial structure, and the original purpose for which it is built has a certain level of need in terms of parking. Well, what would happen at some point in the future should that use potentially significantly change? So say, for example, a building goes from an office space to an event center. The building's already been built, all the infrastructure is there. It may have, I don't know, let's just say 25 parking spaces for office staff. But under an event center, it could, potentially have a lot more people trying to get to that destination. Would there be some sort of mechanism kick in that would deal with that situation?
Sure. So right now, if a change in land use occurs that requires additional parking, we require them to provide additional parking. The exception to that really is recently the council passed an adaptive reuse policy where buildings of some historic significance wouldn't need to provide additional parking on site, especially in hopes that we wouldn't have to, do tear downs of legacy buildings in order to just meet the requirements of a parking ordinance. In a city that does not have parking minimums, there wouldn't be any regulatory requirement to provide additional parking on site with the change of a land use. I'm not sure if that answers.
Yeah, I guess, is that a problem elsewhere where people have eliminated, and these are probably, maybe perhaps even a rare situation where a building would change so significantly in its use to, going from like an office space to an event center where, office space has a much lower requirement. Is that hypothetical that I'm presenting even a thing?
Yeah, so I'm sure that that situation occurs. I will say, kind of tangential to that, that I think we're trying to think of parking more as a piece of a transportation demand management suite. If a developer, provides, has a building and it, as you mentioned, maybe changes land use and there's additional demand for that site, then parking is an arrow in a quiver with potentially many arrows of walking, biking, transit, carpooling, car sharing, any number of things. So while I'm not naive to the fact that most people here drive, I drive, to and from work, but I think that, thinking about it more in a transportation demand management way instead of just how many specific parking spaces you need to provide type of way, I think that it's healthier for an overall city and an overall mobility system within that city.
Yeah. So is does the comprehensive plan or, the work that you are doing now, does it sort of document what the objective and, does it actually spell out on paper, sort of condensed in one document? Will it sort of, will there be sort of a guiding document that encapsulates all of this?
Sure. Yeah, I think there can be. I'll say the comprehensive plan obviously is the city's comprehensive plan. It doesn't specifically call for, it doesn't get as granular as calling for specific parking policies, although it does strongly encourage an assessment of how we require off-street parking and having a healthy look at that. But I think an overall, obviously within the zoning ordinance, that is kind of our guiding document for how we require off-street parking. But just a more broad parking approach, parking strategy, I think could be a document.
And I think I have a lot of that already pieced together, because we've been planning this and working on this for a while now, and it probably lives in several different documents of kind of the steps and the systems that we're taking a look at. So if that's something you want to see kind of in one cohesive document, we can certainly pull that together. And kind of, I think another nice way to look at it is just kind of the order of operations, So I know that some folks want to jump to the end and see, dynamic pricing and a permitting system and all this other stuff. But there's a lot of other things we have to do in order to get to that end result where we can have a successful enforcement and all that good stuff. So
yeah, I think at a minimum, sort of a timeline, strategic plan, might be helpful. The other reason I ask about that is that I don't think government should work on the basis of oral tradition. That in the past, we have had folks who have ideas formulated, but they're, not articulated where anybody else has access to them. And that's a problem for continuity. The facts are that folks get other opportunities, they move on, something happens to folks that are in these sort of leadership positions that guide policy, and I know that nobody's in love with extensive documents, but it's really the best practice in terms of maintaining consistency and actually achieving objectives. So, yeah, I think, something along those lines may be beneficial, because there's no guarantee that, 3-4 years from now, the same folks that you have in leadership will still be in those positions.
It's true. We'll be able to give you something here shortly that outlines our goals and plans.
All right. So this is just really an update. You guys aren't asking for anything. Good luck in those zoning committee meetings.
That's what we needed. We needed your good luck.
Yeah, just
It's gonna
hang
be
in
fun.
there. You could power through it.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. All right, next up, we have Mr. Jim Ritchie, who's going to talk to us about areas of persistent poverty. The Regional Planning Commission of Greater Birmingham recently was awarded a grant from the US DOT. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the name of the grant program is?
Areas of persistent poverty.
Yeah. Make sure you talk into the mic, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm joined also with Scott Tillman, who is helping to lead this work. If we can go ahead and bring up the slides. Now, the grant program is called Areas of Persistent Poverty. We want to call the study Areas of Opportunity because we really want to look to find ways to bring greater opportunities to the communities. Now, the purpose of the study is to empower the city of Birmingham and the adjoining communities that are also within the areas of persistent poverty study area to really find new opportunities so that we can find ways to reach out to new partners and new projects that we maybe can put together for future federal grant opportunities. Now, we already know we've got some that are in the pipeline, and I hope, Darrell, you came back from Washington with the announcement for the railroad crossing elimination project.
Not just yet, but we're hopeful.
Well, I'm really hopeful. I think that will be a huge benefit. But what other projects like that can we really find that can help in North Birmingham, West, as well as other ideas in the East to better connect our communities? Go ahead and let's go to the next slide. This is the study area that describes the census tracts that are in the area that were eligible for areas of persistent poverty study funds. The Woodlawn area, North Birmingham, Fairfield, Lipscomb, Ensley in West Birmingham. Those are the areas that we are to focus on. It's not all that we will look at. There are other planning grants that have also been received by the city recently, the Reconnecting Communities work, for example, and a BJCTA transfer-oriented development study. We want to make sure that this study and those other two studies really work closely together so that we're just not dealing with a few geographic areas, but we're in fact dealing with opportunities for the communities as a whole. Let's go to the next slide. Our alternatives are intended to be quite broad. While transit and transportation are keys to it, we're also really looking at economic development, housing especially. We really think one of the things that made the Birmingham BRT application fly, before was the connection to the housing authority and the work that was being done there. We think that's just as vital, that we really work well with housing so that affordable housing is absolutely part of each of the transit initiatives. Now, next slide are studies that are, this is the mapping from the city's application for reconnecting communities, showing the real barriers that our interstate highway systems have generated for us. And that Reconnecting Communities study, which we will be working collaboratively with, is to be underway sometime in the next few months, and we'll make sure that we're working closely with that. Go ahead on the next slide. We want to know from you all about current initiatives. We've already met just a few minutes ago with the mayor, listening for initiatives that he and his staff knows are underway. Others, if there are other initiatives that we need to know about and we can collaborate with, we are absolutely looking forward to that. The real goal for us is to find projects that we can piece together, even little sidewalk projects, longer trail projects, transit center projects, transit investment initiatives, or other community investment ideas that can help to address the recurring poverty and these areas of Birmingham that we're focused on. But really help us to make sure that this short list that we have right now of community initiatives is further fleshed out so that we can make sure that we are getting all of the ideas together. Go ahead, our next one. Now, public engagement will be absolutely part of this work. We're going to talk to each of the communities and community meetings, not neighborhood meetings, but community meetings, about the study, inviting public participation. We've also begun outreach today, even with a number of the pastors that can help us to get some of that work. Tomorrow we'll have our first stakeholder committee meeting. Have a group of about 30 that have been invited that are going to help us to answer some questions about poverty and how we can maybe begin to address poverty. Go ahead to my next slide. Community connections, I've already mentioned, are a critical piece. If there are other community actors that really need to be part of this discussion. Now, we've already begun to learn others. If you know of others that you really think we need to be talking to, we'd love to have them. One more. Now, our deliverables are really intended to be projects in conceptual plans that we can put together and go after dollars for, that we can make into investments that can be real 3 to 5 years from now. Now, I still think I know that there are parts of our Birmingham BRT implementation plan. It wasn't one line that we proposed in the plan. There were 3 lines that we proposed in the plan. Now, they all don't have to be quite as elaborate as the line that we've now constructed. But we think there are some immediate wins. One, for example, I think we ought to be starting the line in Eastlake, not just in Woodlawn. We would get so much more ridership. One more station out at Puerto Madrid area. And there are a number of things that we think can be part of our deliverables on ideas that are near-term or mid-term implementation. Go ahead. This is our timeline. We said the timeline is 18 months and starts with really the study phase that we're in right now. And but real key, this administration has defined time limit. The time to be having grants applied for is before this administration is out the door. Now's the time. So we're going to accelerate every idea we can quicker so that we're ready to write grant applications before the end of this presidential term. So while I show an 18-month time frame, we can stop everything that we're working on. If we've got the right project to write the grant application for, that's what we ought to be doing, and that's what we will help you to do. Next one. Next steps, we are beginning community dialogue. We want as many ideas as we can of projects that really need to go. Now, Daryl, I still remember very well, some years ago, you and I rode around your neighborhood looking at ideas. I still remember a number of them. But we've got to do the same thing in North Birmingham, in West Birmingham, where we began to really get those kind of nitty-gritty ideas of things that we really need to make happen. And that's really what our next steps are, is finding the opportunities that we can work through. So thank you very much for giving us the time today.
Yeah, it's great. So it's good to hear that this is going to sort of work in concert with the Reconnecting Communities grant opportunity. Sounds like there's a lot of synergy that could happen there.
Daryl, it's our absolute intention to make that happen, and we're looking forward to working with the city as that goes to contract. And once it's underway, we really think we got to figure out how to share data, how to share information, how to do community engagement together. Those will be the sort of things that I think the Transit Authority, the city, Regional Planning Commission need to set up almost a steering committee to make those all work together.
Right. With probably HABD also represented in there too, because unfortunately, Birmingham still has a old model of public housing, and where we have, concentrated poverty. So most of our public housing communities, have 500 or more units. So, and unfortunately, those also coincide with the number of incidents of violent crime in particular. So, it's, I think just inherently that the housing authority, has to be part of the conversation. And it seems like so this is a USDOT grant.
Yes, sir.
And it seems to be very transportation oriented, particularly public transportation. But it's also envisioning like the built environment as well. Is that correct to say? I mean, in terms of what types of development opportunities may work best in particular geographies, is that accurate to say?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think we should, now, the scope that we have written for this study, because we're responding to Regional Planning Commission's request, our scope is intentionally broad to look at a broad range of improvements that can deal with persistent poverty. I think one of the improvements that I'd like to get our hands around a little bit is stormwater. That you mentioned Puerto Madrid underwater. Well, that is largely, in my view, because of the interstate highway systems that we built in the floodplain, and we took substantial amounts of floodplain and we put bridges and piers and ramps in. And I think we've really got to think of, is there anything we can do with the Corps of Engineers that really could address stormwater. I think that would be one of the most vital improvements in the community. But housing, affordable housing, working with the land bank, working at what has already been a great start on Birmingham Land Bank, but also Fairfield, for example, is now beginning to start a land bank. How do we get, because one of the real things that perpetuates poverty is the vacant buildings and the dilapidated structures. And as we begin to deal with those structures, improving the ones that can be improved and removing the ones that can't, all of a sudden we really, I think, begin to change the direction forward. And the land bank, I think, is a great place that we started 6-7 years ago. And now I'd love to see how this project can maybe identify opportunities within land bank assets that the city can take advantage of.
What about other modes? I'm thinking about, you mentioned sidewalks a minute ago, but you know, a Red Rock Ridge and Valley Trail System plan also, you know, envisions a pretty robust network. So there's, you know, some greenways and other, even some projects that we're currently going after in terms of the RAISE grant application. But, you know, those types of considerations will be included in this study as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you may recall the US 11 East study, where we looked at complete streets as a central part of it. The study is a workshop with city staff that we've called just a complete streets initial workshop, because we really want to hear ideas for projects that could benefit from near-term conceptual estimates, near-term feasibility studies. We can do those as part of this work. We do want to focus not complete streets citywide, but in these neighborhoods of persistent poverty at this point. But we'd really like to see, are there projects we could bring more to fruition that haven't been so far?
Yeah. Well, I'd just like to take the opportunity to advocate for my constituents and say I think I definitely have heard from a lot of folks on the east side who feel very much jilted that they got cut out of the BRT because of the escalating costs of the project. And, you know, the folks out in Roebuck never miss an opportunity to remind us that the original scope of that project was to go out to the Parkway. So, you know, baby steps, you know, so getting it to Eastwood would be great. That would certainly, you know, help my constituents a lot. And in terms of my district specifically, Wahoma and Eastlake have the highest concentrations of dilapidated and vacant properties. But another community that I think a lot about that has a lot of potential from my perspective is Gate City. So Georgia Road is literally a 80-foot wide strip of pavement for most of its length on its southern end, and it connects to you know, 1,000+ acre nature preserve that's within walking distance, you know, for a fit individual. You know, Porto Madrid is perhaps it's not a complete street now, but it is a multimodal street now. So I see a lot of potential opportunity, and Gate City, I believe, is underserved currently with regard to access to transportation. We're so slowly starting to address that. They were recently included in the eastern area for Birmingham On Demand, but including the challenges with the trains, and congestion in Norris Yard and Irondale. Hardly a week goes by that the folks in Harris Homes don't call me and say, I just went to Walmart. The bus driver is having to drop us off at this pedestrian tunnel that's not ADA accessible. I'm, 80 years old, and I have, 10 bags of groceries that I now have to call a grandchild or a friend to help me get to my unit. That happens. I know that happens all the time because I get those calls directly from the person it's happening to. So, that's just an example of the types of, situations that we have occurring across our city. So hopefully we can get some good ideas about how to tackle those things. And, not to say that they aren't being addressed currently, but within the scope of what is envisioned, there's always additional, opportunities. So look forward to working with you guys.
We look forward to the project too. And thank you so much for allowing us to come and talk today and for your continued support.
Yeah, so, getting back to, I know you guys have plans to talk to the Citizens Advisory Board and meeting with the 23 communities throughout the city of Birmingham. Those types of instances, like what I just talked to you about, about an elderly person not being able to, use the public transportation system as intended, having to overcome obstacles. Those are the types of stories that you guys want to hear, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Daryl, as you know, in September, we held community meetings at Harris Homes. Mm-hmm. And I walked that tunnel. It's nice that you're able to get under the railroad, but it certainly is not ADA accessible. Mm-hmm. And for the customer that's left on the school side of the tunnel saying, get home on your own, is a real challenge. And it's one that I'm glad that the city is really working hard to try to get that grade separation project underway. But I know there are other projects like that, I suspect in North Birmingham and West Birmingham, that I haven't heard. And so we're going to really do our best to get out and listen.
Right. I'm thinking about a lot of our residential areas that were constructed in, mid-century that made no accommodation for anyone traveling via any means but a car. So no sidewalk infrastructure at all. I'm sure that those types of...
It's been 30 years since we passed the Americans with Disabilities Act. We need to make our transportation infrastructure fully accessible. We can. Now, we've done it a little bit piecemeal, but we really need to look at really all of our bus stops. Our bus stops have got to be accessible. Every place we can. Our sidewalks have got to be accessible. Our trails. Now, our trails, I think, are accessible, but we really have to really look at it. You mentioned the Red Rock Trail plan. Absolutely a key piece of what we will look at to see what are the next elements that are ready for implementation.
Okay. Great. Well, I really do hope that you guys get a lot of participation, and do get those sort of firsthand accounts from folks at the neighborhood level to let you know where the challenges are.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and we look forward to coming back and talking some more.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, and item number 7, new and old business. I want to just let everyone know that Mr. Hager Hill on the Birmingham Parking Authority has officially submitted his resignation, which opens up a board position on the Birmingham Parking Authority. The Birmingham Parking Authority has a 3-member board. Those appointments are for a 2-year term, and the only requirement is that the persons be a resident of the city of Birmingham. You have to be able to vote in the city of Birmingham. Just want to let folks know that if you're interested in serving in that capacity, please contact me via email. My email address is daryl.oquin@birminghamal.gov. And we'll be trying to fill that position as soon as possible. I believe the Parking Authority meets the fourth Thursday of each month, which means that they have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks. Probably won't get that vacancy filled in that amount of time, but you never know. Anyway, other than that, I think we covered it all. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.